Sarah. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you, Maddie. How are you?
I'm brilliant. I'm very excited for this interview. We've got a right treat for today. And speaking of a right treat, I think that we should dive straight in with our first song of the evening. And this first song is called Yellowstone. Can you tell us about this song before we hear it?
Yeah, it's one that I wrote after my son. Well, as you can hear in the first line of the song, he was 10 when I wrote it, and he was having trouble sleeping because he was lying awake and worrying about all kinds of things. And I said to him, "Well, what I would do is just write down your worries." And then they can be on the paper and they don't have to be in your head anymore. And that worked really well for him. But of course, being his mother, I had to go and look at the bits of paper where he'd written down all his worries. And one of them was about the underground volcano under Yellowstone. And he was worried that that was going to erupt and set off a big chain reaction of volcanoes all around the globe and trigger the apocalypse. And so naturally, my reaction to that was to write a song about it. My son can't sleep, he's 10 years old. He's scared that Yellowstone will blow. And when it does, it could set off a mighty chain reaction. Volcanoes round the world exploding, darkened skies and lava flowing. His mind won't let it go. He's 10 years old. I try to tell him not to worry. There's no point in dwelling on the things we can't control, especially when we're 10 years old. I try to tell him how the chances are so small that circumstances will combine to trigger that eventuality. And he looks back at me. He says, I know that, but even so, my mind won't let it go. Well, I've got worries of my own. Another simmering Yellowstone beneath the earth, releasing spurts each time the pressure rises. I know I'm not the only one to fear the ground I tread upon. Volcanoes of all kinds torment our minds. Who am I to say don't worry? How can we help dwelling on the things
song was from your latest album, the St. Buryan Sessions. And I really want to explore that album because it's quite unique in a way, and we'll get into that. But first, you've released 5 other solo albums along with other collaborations and single releases and things. And I'm just curious about how this particular album, the St. Buryan Sessions, differs from your other albums.
Well, for starters, it's live. I've never done a live album before. It's something I've always really wanted to do because I kind of feel like when you're performing live, especially if you've got like an audience there and everything and they're behind you, there's something that comes out in the songs that just doesn't come out when you're in a studio and in that kind of sterile environment. And so it's something I'd been thinking about. And then we got to March 2020, and suddenly I was supposed to be starting a 3-month tour, and the whole thing got cut short, and we had to come dashing home from Germany, which is where I was at the time. And we'd been talking about maybe making that live album in the summer of 2020, and we sort of got as far as thinking about where we could record it and so on, and and setting up a gig and inviting people and all that kind of thing. And I said to my wonderful manager, who's also my sound engineer, Martin Stansbury, oh gosh, well, I guess we can't do that live album now.
Mm.
And he said, well, you know what, maybe we can. And maybe doing a live album without an audience and doing it in a really nice place and videoing the whole thing and getting really good, high quality videos of the whole thing, maybe that's what we can do instead of kind of trying to live stream from home, which is what a lot of my friends were doing. And I just, for a whole lot of different reasons, I really wasn't keen on the notion of doing live stream. For one thing, I just didn't feel that I could perform to a phone in my living room and
Yeah.
and do my job. I just didn't feel like I could do it. And so Martin came up with the whole idea of going into this beautiful space of St. Buryan Church, which is this gorgeous medieval church just up the road from where I live, and setting up a really, really high quality recording and getting a good film crew in as well. A wonderful Cornish filmmaker called Morgan Lewis and another cameraman called John Crooks, who's really good. I mean, he works on the Eden sessions, which are these lovely filmed, beautiful performances at the Eden Project and everything. And so, make a really good quality live recording and live video.
Mm.
And then that became my way of keeping up the interaction with people when I didn't have audiences, of putting these videos out one at a time, because it takes a long time to edit video and get all the colors grading and everything like that with the different cameras. So I was only getting about one song, a finished video every month or so, but that was kind of good timing to kind of put each one up on YouTube and have kind of a live premiere and chat with people online, in the video premiere while the track was being aired. And yeah, the whole thing just came together really nicely. And it also gave me a chance to do live versions of a lot of songs that have been in my kind of catalog for a while and had kind of grown and evolved since I first recorded them. And I really wanted to get a chance to record them the way I was performing them live in concert. And we didn't have an audience, obviously, but just doing it in that place and just having the 3 guys in there with me, it gave me enough of the kind of electricity and the magic to actually be able to perform the songs as though I were performing them in concert. And
Yeah.
because we didn't have an audience, we didn't have to worry about sight lines, like the cameras could get right in there in my face, and we could kind of adjust lenses and lay down track for the cameras to glide along and all that kind of stuff that you couldn't really do if you were trying to set it up with an audience in there. So I feel like in the end, it kind of became the best of both worlds, really.
Yeah. And so if people listen to that album, is it songs that you've written previously on different albums but performed live? Is that what they should expect?
Um, Most of the material, yeah, is songs that I've written and performed on previous albums in studio with guests. But never recorded live solo the way I perform them. There are also two tracks that I hadn't previously recorded and that I didn't write. I did a cover of Rabbit Hills by the great Michael Chapman, who had produced my previous album, If We Dig Any Deeper, It Could Get Dangerous. And I also did a cover of Autumn Leaves, the kind of jazz classic standard, which I'd been doing in my live gigs. And people kept asking me if I'd recorded it. And I kept saying no. So I thought I should get the chance to say yes and go ahead and record that one as well. And I always think, I'm kind of focused on my own material and stuff that I've co-written as well. But I think it's really good to do covers sometimes and
Yeah.
do songs that were written by other people and try and get your head into somebody else's song and really see what you can bring to it and try and make it your own. I think that's always a good exercise to do.
100%, and appreciate another person's work by honoring them through it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And is it an approach that you want to take again in the future?
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to try and do the thing again because it would be, I mean, it would be kind of, I've done that now and it would be kind of hackneyed and it would feel like, taking it too far to try and do exactly the same thing again. But certainly the approach of making a recording that's as close to live as possible and not giving myself the option of doing overdubs and multiple takes and all that kind of stuff. I do think the next time I approach a studio album, I'll try and see if I can find a way to keep it as live as possible. And I definitely like to work more with live video because having that video content has been really important. And I think it's also been really good. I've noticed just this last little bit of touring that I did in February, a lot of people were coming up to me at the merch table and saying, "Well, I watched your St. Buryan Sessions videos, so I wanted to come to the show." And it's it's actually really good to have all of that quality live video up there. I had live video on my YouTube channel before, but it was mostly stuff that people had shot from the back of the room with an iPhone, so having the good quality with multiple cameras and multiple angles and all that stuff, I think makes a big difference.
It's a good reference point to who you are as a musician, definitely. And you said that in the album there's a cover of like a jazzy piece, and as we'll see throughout all of the performances tonight, there's the acoustic guitar, the electric guitar, there's some unaccompanied song, and then isn't there at some point in the album some grand piano as well in it? And I wanted to explore really your influences because there's quite a lot of varying things going on there, and I wanted to really dig deeper into that.
Yeah, I mean, my influences have been pretty eclectic. I mean, I guess my earliest influences were kind of American folk music that my mother loved and played herself and sang. She played guitar and piano, and she taught me to play piano and guitar when I was really little. And she was really into your Peggy Seeger and Jean Ritchie and all those American folk singers. And then when I was 7, I joined the Chicago Children's Choir, which was a really pro children's choir. I mean, we did television stuff and we toured all over the USA and into Canada as well. And so first of all, that was a really good introduction to kind of the professional side of performing and gave me a lot of really good musical training, a bit of a grounding in music theory and voice training and things like that. And it also was just a great introduction to a really wide range of music, from kind of classical music to contemporary music to show tunes to, all kinds of arrangements of German folk songs and Spanish folk songs and all. We did a really wide range of gospel music as well, lots of that. So that was loads of different music. And then I got to be a teenager and discovered Joni Mitchell and, um, all the kind of uh, English folk singers as well from the 60s and 70s that that were, I mean, this is a good bit. This is 20 years on from there, but yeah, no, I had quite kind of nostalgic tastes in music when I was a teenager and was really into Joni Mitchell in a big way. And I guess that's what got me started kind of trying to write songs. And then I wound up playing with a traditional Irish band and learning a lot about Irish music, and then moving to England and discovering Elizabethan music. So, and all the while listening to new music that was coming out. I'm still discovering new artists that whose music I haven't heard before, and I listen to a really, really wide range of music myself, and I guess it all goes in there.
Yeah. And as you said, your mum was a big influence there, but the rest of your family, well, not the rest, but a lot of your family are musicians. You've got your uncle, cousins, you're even related to Gamble Rogers. Does that have a big influence on your career?
Um, well, it hasn't, only in the sense that it gave me early on the kind of awareness that music was something you could make your life of. The music was something you could do for a living, even if you weren't mega famous. I think a lot of people out there, they see, I don't know, Adele or whoever on TV, and then they see maybe somebody down their local pub, and they don't have a consciousness that there's a big in-between area where people
Mm,
are doing stuff professionally and making a living at it. Not a very good living, it has to be said, but there are a lot of different ways as well to make music on a professional basis, and that's really exemplified in my family. Like, one of my cousins plays in indie rock bands, and another cousin works with, used to work with the Dallas Symphony Orchestra, and now he's working with a different orchestra. Um, and then another one is involved in musical theater. So, there's it gave me a really good knowledge in the kind of range of music that's out there, and just the possibilities and the different things you can do.
mm. I think that we should go for our second song now, which is The Tug of the Moon. Can you tell us about this song?
Well, this one I wrote after we had the leap second at the end of 2016. I don't know if you remember, that year we had to add an extra second to the countdown on New Year's Eve. And I read this whole newspaper article about it, and it got me really excited, because the reason we had to add the extra second is that the moon's gravitational pull on the Earth not only gives us the tides, it's also gradually slowing down the Earth's rotation, very, very slowly over the years. So every hour of every day of every year is just a tiny hair longer than the one before it. Time really is actually slowing down. And so that noon is still noon when the sun is directly overhead, and so that our accurate atomic clocks keep pace with the position of the sun in the sky, every so often we have to add just one extra second just to compensate for this slowing down of time. And that just blew my mind when I read it. I was like, oh my gosh. So again, like with Yellowstone, had to write a song. The tug of the moon is slowing us down, drawing the tides, buckling the ground, little by little, as centuries pass, it stretches our days. The years growing longer by such small degrees, we don't notice the change until noon comes a moment too late. So we make an adjustment in time at the end of the countdown, before auld lang syne. sun, we greet the new year, while the moon passes over us ever more distantly, pulling away. As he turned towards the sunrise, and night becomes day, we count up the lengthening hours that remain till the end comes too soon, for on earth spinning under the tug of the
As people can probably tell from your accent, you are not from England, even though you are currently living in Cornwall. Have I got that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've got, if you look into your like where you've lived and your ethnicity and all that sort of stuff, you're half Spanish, half American. You've got Irish citizenship, and you now live in Cornwall. Would you say that your music reflects this multinational background?
Oh yeah, completely. Yeah, yeah. I mean, as I said earlier, I've kind of taken influences from everywhere I've been and everything I've done, and I'm kind of lucky in that I'm at home in a lot of different places, and maybe not completely at home anywhere, and I think that's kind of a good quality in a musician. I mean, musicians are kind of natural nomads, aren't we? You know, we all um, tour around and have a bit of that kind of unrooted quality, and maybe that kind of helps with the music in a way. So yeah. I've always had this kind of strange feeling of not quite belonging anywhere I've ever been, but I've kind of come to terms with that, and I'm very happy living here where I am in Cornwall. I do love it here, and I don't plan on going and living anywhere else, but it's nice to know that the option exists.
Yeah, I remember you saying that when you're in the States, they don't think you sound American, but when
Yeah.
you're in Ireland, they don't think you sound Irish. And obviously, in the UK, you don't sound British to us.
No,
So it is
no.
that feeling of where do you fit in there? But I suppose there's a part of you in each of the places.
Yeah, I mean, everywhere I go, people think I sound like I'm from somewhere else.
It keeps you like everyone's interested then. They want to know where you're from. It's nice. So, as you said, you're happy with Cornwall at the moment, but which of the countries that you've lived in has your favourite folk scene, or in your opinion, has the best folk scene?
Oh no, I couldn't. I mean, they all have really good folk scenes, and I feel really, again, I feel lucky that I've managed to, to get to experience the scenes in all these different places. And all three countries have constantly evolving scenes as well. I mean, since I've been in America, a whole bunch of really good songwriters have come on the scene, some of whom I've been privileged to get to know. And possibly wouldn't have ever got to know if I'd stayed in the US. It's
Mm.
only by virtue of living somewhere else and coming back to the US and touring around and meeting lots of different people that I get to know all these different people. And same in Ireland. In Ireland, just again, since I've left Ireland, a whole bunch of wonderful new bands like Lancome and Emma Langford, and all these new artists are coming on stream. Keely is another great one. She's just brought out her first EP, and then here in England, of course, there's constant new music coming out. I'm really into. There's a wonderful songwriter called Helen Meissner, or Heliphonics is the name that she performs under. She's just brought out a new album as well called The Awakening, which is fantastic. So all three countries have really vibrant, healthy new music scenes with new artists and new bands appearing all the time and making wonderful music. And that's really wonderful to see.
Yeah. And do you plan to go back and tour around all of these other countries when you can?
Well, yeah, I'm scheduled to tour in Ireland in April, and so I'll be doing a tour in both Ireland and the UK in April and May, starting in the Republic of Ireland and then going up into the north and then heading over to Scotland and then coming down again through England. And I was scheduled to do an American tour in September and October, and that, as of yesterday, is canceled
Oh
because
no.
it just we were trying to make it work, and just more and more venues were saying to me, you know what, I'm not actually sure this gig can happen. um, people, there's so much uncertainty, not just because of COVID, because of everything that's going on in the world at the moment. And while I'm perfectly okay with doing tours around Ireland and the UK, because if I have to get home at a moment's notice, I can do that. um, for me, the thought of doing a long haul, doing the whole thing of doing a long haul flight and possibly getting into the middle of the US, miles from, and then suddenly having to get home quickly the way I did from Germany in March of 2020, it just felt way too risky. And lots can happen in the next 6 or 8 months, and who knows what things will be like by September. And maybe everything will be great, but the thing is, we don't know that. And for the sake of the venues as well, that were the ones that were still trying to go ahead and make my gigs happen, if I say to them now I have to cancel, then they have time to book another artist and make their plans and make alternative arrangements. And what I didn't want to do is mess them about by discovering 3 months ahead of a show that I had to cancel, or a week ahead of the show or whatever.
Mm.
So it just felt way too risky. So
Yeah.
that's gone now. Which is a shame, because I was really looking forward to getting back over there. I mean, it's where I grew up, and I've been touring every year in America for 10 years, from 2009 until 2019. Fall 2019 was the last time I was over there, and I did a big long tour thinking I was going to be coming back again in 2020 and 2021 and 2022. And yeah, now it's hopefully going to be 2023, and I really
The
hope that one happens.
uncertainty of being a musician, it's a hard life to have the commitments there and the certainty there. You never know, especially at the moment. Um, but I'm curious, when you're living in these different countries, for example, when you're in Ireland and you began your professional music career, did your albums sound different when you're over there compared to now you're here in the in England? Are they different now?
Oh yeah, I mean, my all of my albums have been quite different, in terms of the first album that I made, When Two Lovers Meet, back in 1997. I was still very much immersed in the whole traditional Irish music scene, and almost all of the material on that album is traditional Irish music. There's one song that I wrote on there, and then when I made the second album, I was just kind of in the middle of moving to England, but my mother had just died. And so for the second album, I kind of went back to um, the the songs that she had loved, and that I'd kind of grown up with. And I also wrote two new songs that were about her. And then I moved over to England, and I started recording the third album. And I had the same producer for all three of the first three albums, Jerry O'Byrne, who's a wonderful Irish singer-songwriter, and who did a lovely, lovely job on production on all three of them. But with the third album, first of all, I was kind of getting into the Elizabethan music, and so it's got quite a bit of Elizabethan and even medieval music. There's a song in old Occitan from the 13th century on there from the south of France, and then when I moved to England, I met a woman called Zoe, who was a former pop star and had this massive hit single back in the early 90s called Sunshine on a Rainy Day, and which was a huge chart hit. And we met because our kids were going to the same tiny little school here in West Cornwall, and we got to be friends. And she and I started writing songs together. And that was really the start of me thinking of myself as a songwriter and actually making an effort to write songs, which before I'd kind of written an occasional song, but it was kind of almost by accident. And I didn't go looking for song ideas, and I didn't go, actually trying to write songs. They just kind of occasionally happened. And so actually, when I made The Plum Tree and the Rose, I'd recorded what I thought was the album prior to working with Zoe. And then I started working with Zoe, and I suddenly started writing a whole bunch of new songs. And I wound up 2 years after thinking I had finished that album, I wound up going back over to Ireland, back into the studio with Jerry, and recording a whole bunch of new material and ditching a lot of the previous stuff that I'd recorded, some of which has come out since as kind of B-sides on singles. But
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a direct result of moving to England and meeting Zoe, was starting to focus on songwriting. And then for the fourth album, Walking into White, I wanted to work with a different producer, and I'd been thinking for a while that it would be really nice to do something with my cousin Adam, who I mentioned earlier in this interview, who's the kind of indie rock guy. He plays with his own band, Mice Parade, and also with a band called the Swirlies. And he's not in the kind of folk music world at all. And I thought it would be really good to work with somebody coming from a completely different musical direction, somebody who could really kind of broaden my horizons and kind of push me in a different direction,
Yeah.
And so that happened in spades with Adam, my cousin. I suddenly the main thing about working with Adam was that he was a great editor. He was a great one for cutting songs shorter, He'd say, "You got 4 verses in that song. You only need 2. Get rid of the 2 of them. I don't care which 2 you get rid of, but get rid of 2 of them." Okay, And so yeah, I learned a lot from that one as well. And that was made over in the USA, in upstate New York, where Adam lives. And then for the fifth album, I worked with the great Michael Chapman, who's a legendary guitarist and wonderful, wonderful songwriter, who's sadly left us earlier, or just last year, at the end of last year, last September, which was dreadfully sad and a great loss to music. But I'm very glad that I did get the chance to work with him and record with him. And he produced the If We Dig Any Deeper, It Could Get Dangerous. And it was Michael who got me started playing electric guitar, which I had never done before. And he also, between him and Martin Stansbury, my manager and sound engineer who produced the St. Buryan sessions as well, Martin persuaded me that I should play piano on an album. So the Dig Any Deeper album has my debut on keyboards. And so that was another change, and then the St. Buryan sessions, I'm actually playing drum as well, which I had never done before that album. So it's constantly evolving and constantly changing. And again, I think that's really good and healthy. And it can be, not everybody is as happy with it as I am. I get some people coming up to me and saying, "I really liked your first album, all the traditional music, Irish material. Why didn't you stay and just keep doing that stuff?" But that wouldn't have been me to keep doing that stuff. And you know, I think artists have to evolve, and sometimes it can be. I mean, look at it was like a bit of a Dylan goes electric moment, you know. Sometimes not every fan is going to be happy with the direction of the evolution of every artist, but I think it's still important to keep evolving.
Let's have your third song now, which is Sweetness and Pain. Can you tell us about this song?
Now, this is one that I recorded on the Walking into White album with Adam, and Adam had the brilliant idea for that album of separating the song into its three parts and having each part of the song being a little interlude between two other songs. So on that album, you've got a couple of tracks, and then you've got Sweetness and Pain 1, and then you've got a few more tracks in Sweetness and Pain 2, and so on. And actually I liked that effect so much that for the first year after I released the Walking into White album, I was performing the entire album live, track for track, as the first half of every gig, in order just to have those little song fragments in there as kind of interludes, and then going back to another full song, and then another little a cappella interlude. But like everything, I'd done that for a while, and then it was like, okay, time to move on.
Yeah.
And I started doing the whole song as one song. And that was really nice too. And I thought, so when I went to make the live album, the St. Buryan Sessions, I thought, it would be really nice to actually get the opportunity to go back to Sweetness and Pain, but instead of having it as three fragments, have it as one full, complete song, start to finish. And so that's what I did. The sweetness of the berry doesn't take away the pain of the briar when it stabs you in the hand, but the power of your craving for the fruit among the thorns is driving you to risk another chance. Sweetness and pain, summer sun and autumn rain. The bramble does not seek to harm, it merely seeks to live. It endures without malice or intention. There's no question of forgiveness, no apology, no pardon for minor wounds too numerous to mention. Sweetness and pain, winter winds return again. Sharp black thorns concealed and smoothed by softly falling snow. Drops of blood like bright red flowers. This hurt will pass. Just let it go. Sweetness and pain, shake it off and start again.
You haven't always been a professional musician, but instead worked in different areas of the music industry, for example, as a music journalist. What sort of thing were you doing as a journalist?
Well, I was doing a few different things. I was doing live reviews of gigs and theater as well. I was doing album reviews, which I think was actually really good preparation for being a musician, because it meant I was forced to listen to loads and loads of music. At one point, I had to write 5 album reviews every week. And, and that was, and so I was constantly listening, and usually I felt like in order to write a review of an album and do it justice, I really had to listen to the album about 3 times through, start to finish, before I could start to write about it. And, and sometimes more. Sometimes you'd find yourself going back over a track again and again. So I listened to tons of music, and I went out to loads of live gigs. And I feel I was so lucky to be able to go out, and I saw Tina Turner, I saw James
Oh,
Brown, I saw I keep wanting to say David Lynch, and it's not David Lynch. David, who's in the Talking Heads. David Byrne. David Byrne. I saw David Byrne twice, actually. And, all these musical legends, and see them in action, and see them, luckily, because I was in the press seats, so I got to really see them up close. Emmylou Harris. Oh, man, who else did I, you know, I was a music journalist for, I guess, 7 years in Dublin, and and anybody who came to Dublin, even if I wasn't assigned to review the album, or the show, I still got to usually go to the gig. And so I saw so much music and heard so much music. And I think that was a really good preparation for going out and doing it myself, I, I kind of, I got a lot of opportunities to watch and learn, as they say, and also writing about music. I learned to kind of approach things from the point of view of a music journalist. So I guess I learned um, how to write a press release from the point of view of somebody on the receiving end of press releases.
yeah.
So that was really good as well, and realizing the importance of things like, just having good quality, high res photos available that people can get hold of quickly and not have to chase. And, having a website with your biog on it, and, all that stuff, which I think maybe takes a lot of people a long time to learn. And I knew it all right away because I'd already been on the other side of it, and I knew what a journalist looks for. So it was all a good education, and I learned kind of a lot about graphic design as well, because I was doing kind of general magazine work as well as the music journalism. So I kind of learned to kind of basic graphic design. I mean, I wouldn't call myself a graphic designer, but I can use a graphic design program, and I can do basic kind of posters and flyers and things like that. And all those skills have come in awfully handy as a musician, especially now. I mean, I kind of retrospectively envy the musicians back in the 60s, when you couldn't be your own agent, record company, graphic designer, PR person, when you couldn't do it all yourself, and you had to hand over all those things to somebody else. And so your only job was just to play music and write songs. And I would love that. I really would. It would be really great to not have to spend so much time doing other things besides actually playing music and writing songs and performing them. But at least I have the skills.
But what was it that made you want to move from reviewing the artists to being the artist?
I was just sick of my life. It wasn't so much the music journalism was fine. I wouldn't have minded if it was just that. That would have been okay. But I couldn't make a living as a gig reviewer, an album reviewer. I had a full-time magazine editing job as well. And that was the really soul-destroying bit,
Yeah.
because when you're a magazine editor, unless you're editing maybe a really specialized magazine that exists mostly by subscriptions, but when you're doing kind of general magazines, I was doing a lot of like tourism magazines and magazines that were going into airports and hotels and things like that. And my job was to provide content to go opposite the ads. The reason for being of the magazine was to sell advertising, and my job was to make stuff to put beside the ads. And I just got really miserable doing that. I just thought, why am I spending my life making stuff, disposable stuff to go beside the ads? And I just wanted to do something that would be more meaningful and more lasting. And I'd always got great joy out of performing and entertaining people. I felt was a really worthwhile thing to do. I mean, I've had people come up to me at gigs at the break and say, I nearly didn't come out to the show tonight because I was in a really bad mood and I had a tough day at work and I just wanted to flop. And my friends forced me to come out and I bought the ticket. So I thought, and and now I'm really glad I did because you've just lifted my spirits and I feel better now. And that is worth doing. That is worth working for. It just, I suddenly felt like when I quit my job and became a full-time musician, even though I was flat broke and deep in debt and no hope of ever getting out of it, and my house is crumbling around me, and especially now with COVID, if it weren't for Patreon, I just wouldn't survive at all. I've got some lovely, generous people who are, you know, putting in like a fiver a month or whatever to keep me going. And that's really helping, you know. But even though it means I'm broke, at least I feel like in some sense my life has meaning and I'm much happier.
Definitely, it's all about that you enjoy what you do, not necessarily the money that you get from it. Definitely. And another thing that you've done that isn't solely as a professional musician or professional performer is you're an author. Now this is amazing. You've been awarded a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Ards International Guitar Festival for your book, the Irish Dadgad Guitar Book, um, and for your use of the Dadgad tuning. Before we kind of explore a bit more about that book, can you tell us what the Dadgad tuning is?
Dadgad is an alternative way of tuning the guitar. So standard guitar tuning is EADGBE. Starting with the lowest string and going to the highest. And with Dadgad, you tune the top and bottom E strings down to D, and you tune what would be your B string down to A. So you've got D, A, D, G, A, D, hence Dadgad. That's just the notes that the strings are tuned to. And because you've got three strings tuned to the note D and two strings tuned to the note A, you get a lot of what's called sympathetic resonance, which means that the strings that you're not playing, because they're tuned to the same frequencies as strings that you are playing, they can resonate in sympathy. It's a bit like a sitar, an Indian sitar, or a viola d'amore, or any of those, nickel harpa as well is another one with sympathetic strings. Any of those instruments that have strings that resonate even when they're not being played. And that gives you this lovely, big, lush, full sound, which as a solo player is really nice to have. And I'd experimented with a lot of alternative tunings, or open tunings as they're sometimes called, when I was a teenager, partly because I was into people like Joni Mitchell and John Renburn and Bert Jansch and all the Windham Hill guitarists, and I knew they all used lots of different tunings. But when I discovered Dadgad, I just thought, this is the kind of sound I've been looking for. And I kept just discovering new things I could do with it, and wound up kind of accidentally writing a book about it. It was only because I was editing a book for a friend of mine who'd written a Bowron tutor for the Irish frame drummer, Bowron. And I went into the publisher's office to look at the proofs of the Bowron book and just said over my shoulder as we were leaving, if you ever want a book about playing Dadgad tuned guitar, let me know. And the publisher said, come back in here, sit down. And amazingly, that book came out in 1995, and it's still in print and it's still selling worldwide, and I'm still getting more royalties from it, which is another thing that's helped to keep me going. It's not much, but it does help. So yeah, it was a really good thing to have done. And as I say, it kind of I guess got me noticed by the likes of the guitar festival. I mean, it was my playing as well that they thought I guess, stood out in some way. But yeah, Lifetime Achievement Award. I was kind of blown away by that. I wasn't really expecting, I mean, not to be vain or anything, but I thought I was a little young to be getting a Lifetime Achievement Award. But yeah, no, I was, you could have knocked me over with a feather when it happened.
Absolutely amazing. You're an artist with a lot of strings to your bow. Really
So to
brilliant,
speak.
very interesting. And each thing we could just sit and explore for ages. But unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time left in this interview. So, what I want to do now is just jump onto what you've got going on in the future so that people know what's happening, know what exciting is going on, whether you've got tours and all that sort of thing. So, what have we got in the future?
Well, we've got my April May Ireland and UK tour. So far, that hasn't been cancelled and it's still happening. And I've got a few festival gigs in the summer. I'm going back to the Festival at the Edge, which will be really nice. And I think there's a couple of other summer shows coming in. I'm going to be playing a nice little outdoor theatre that I've played a few times now here in Cornwall. And then, since I'm not doing the American tour after all in September and October, I'm starting to look at other projects that I can be doing, maybe involving recording in September and October. So can't say too much about that yet because it's early days, but I'm hoping to do some stuff then. And then another UK tour in November. And then hopefully going back to Ireland again and back over to continental Europe again as well. That's another tour I was supposed to be doing in March of this year, and it got canceled again. Some gigs now I've rescheduled 3 times in successive years. There are gigs that I was supposed to do in March 2020 and that got rescheduled to March 2021, March 2022. Now they're scheduled for March 2023, and maybe they'll really happen. Wouldn't that be nice? And I want to write some new songs and maybe make some EPs because I've made enough albums. I thought be nice to, after making 6 albums now, I thought maybe it's time I made an EP. So we'll see. Lots of possibilities.
Very exciting. And where do people go to find information about tours and festivals and all that sort of stuff?
To my website, which is sarahmcquaid.com, sarahmcquaid.com. And there's links on there to all my social media. I've got a YouTube channel and I'm on Instagram and, Facebook and Twitter and all that good, Spotify as well, all the streaming sites, Apple Music. So you can get links to all of it on the website.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Sarah. We have run out of time for the interview, but we have got one more song. So just before we hear it, yes, thank you very, very much for joining us. It's been a really wonderful evening and I've had a great time chatting to you.
Thank you.
So now, your final song. Can you tell us about If We Dig Any Deeper, It Could Get Dangerous?
Yeah. And before I do, can I just say thank you, Maddie, and thanks to also you have James and Paul in there with you, and thanks to all of you for making this happen and making this whole series happen. It's really nice that you're doing this, and I hope it continues, and I'm honored to be joining the list of people that you've had. It's great. Dig Any Deeper. It's another song that Eli inspired, actually. A couple of years later, after he inspired Yellowstone, he was out digging a great big hole in the back garden of our house. And I went out to see how he was getting on, and I couldn't actually see him until I walked right up to the edge of the hole. And I looked down into it, and there he was down there still digging. And I said, "Oh, Eli, if you dig any deeper, it could get dangerous." And as soon as the words left my mouth, I just thought, "Oh man, that sounds like the title of a song," and all these kind of extra kind of metaphorical meanings kind of suggested themselves. And hilariously, the boy who was digging the huge hole in the back garden is now studying archaeology at the University of Durham. And he just texted me right before we came on air to say that he's got accommodation for next year, which I'm really happy about. Yay! So yeah, no, but and I'm very grateful to him for inspiring this song and the album title as well. And thanks so much again for having me on the program. There's a boy in the garden with a shovel and a spade. He's gonna dig himself a hole, it's the biggest ever made. Boy in the garden, shovel and spade, biggest hole ever made. I say, I know you're having fun, I don't wanna make a fuss, but if you dig any deeper, it could get dangerous. Now we're drilling through the earth, building pressure all the time, splitting cracks in the rock to free the power inside. Drilling through the earth, pressure all the time, cracks in the rock, power inside. Some things are better left buried down under the crust, and if we dig any deeper, it could get dangerous. Put your shovel away, time to call it a day. Sometimes the way to fix a problem is to turn the pressure off, 'cause if you dig any deeper, it could get dangerous. Dig, 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 dig any deeper. Dig, 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 dig any deeper. Dig, 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 dig any deeper. Dig, 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 dig any deeper. Dig, 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 dig any deeper. Dig, 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 dig any deeper. We're bringing fire and flood, chamber the ground. See the pale horse, hear the trumpet sound. Any deeper. Fire and flame, tremble the ground. Pale horse, trumpet sound. I hope we can stop it, but we need to hurry up, 'cause if we dig any deeper, it could get dangerous. Dig any deeper, it could get dangerous. Dig any deeper, it could get dangerous.
Thank you very much for watching. To find out more information about our future Tuesday Folk People sessions, please sign up to our mailing list or keep an eye on our social media and website. Our next session will be a week from today at 8 p.m. See you then.
There are no more answers in